The kitchen fires burned low in the great stone castle of King Vorthen III. The smell of roasting meat and sweet spices filled the air. Deep underground, in the hot and smoky cooking halls, a small goblin named Gritch stirred a large pot of soup. His green skin was covered in sweat. His yellow eyes watched the bubbling liquid carefully. Gritch had worked in the royal kitchen for 15 years. He started as a floor cleaner when he was just a young goblin. The other cooks kicked him and threw hot water at him. They called him names and laughed at his small size. But Gritch never complained. He watched and learned. He memorized every recipe. He studied every technique. When the head chef was too drunk to work, Gritch would secretly prepare the dishes. Nobody knew. Nobody cared to know. The kingdom of Drakmor was not a kind place for goblins. King Vorthen had conquered the goblin territories 30 years ago. He had killed thousands of goblin warriors. He had burned their villages and taken their children as slaves. The surviving goblins were forced to work in mines, farms, and kitchens. They had no rights. They had no voice. They were property. Gritch remembered his mother. She had been a healer in their village. When the human soldiers came, she tried to protect the young ones. A knight had cut her down without a second thought. Gritch was only 5 years old. He watched from behind a broken wall. That memory never left him. It visited him every night in his dreams. The head chef was a fat human named Barth. He was cruel and stupid. He took credit for all the good food that Gritch made. When something went wrong, he blamed the goblin. Borath would beat Gritch with a wooden spoon for the smallest mistakes, sometimes for no reason at all. The other kitchen workers found this entertaining. They would gather and watch. Some would place bets on how many hits the goblin could take before falling. But things were about to change. King Vorthen had announced a great feast. Nobles from 7 kingdoms would attend. There would be dancing and music. There would be speeches about the glory of Drakmor. Most importantly, there would be food. Mountains of food. The king wanted to show his wealth and power. He wanted everyone to see that he was the greatest ruler in all the lands. The pressure on the kitchen was enormous. Barth screamed at everyone. He threw pots and pans. He even stabbed a young cook with a fork for dropping a plate of fruit. The boy nearly died. Nobody reported it. Nobody dared. 3 days before the feast, something interesting happened. A mysterious woman visited the castle. She wore dark robes and had silver hair. Her eyes were completely black. She asked to speak with the kitchen staff. The guards laughed at her. Why would a noble want to talk to cooks and servants? But this woman was no ordinary noble. She was a witch from the northern mountains. Her people had also suffered under King Vorthen. He had burned their sacred forests. He had captured their elders and executed them as heretics. The witch had waited many years for revenge. She found Gritch alone in the herb garden. The goblin was collecting rosemary and thyme for the next day's preparations. The witch approached slowly. She did not want to frighten him. "You are the one who truly cooks for the king," she said softly. Gritch looked up with fear in his eyes. How did she know? Had someone discovered his secret? Would he be punished? The witch smiled gently. "Do not be afraid, little one. I am not your enemy. I have watched you for a long time. I have seen how they treat you. I have seen your suffering." Gritch said nothing. He had learned that silence was safer than words. The witch reached into her robe and pulled out a small glass bottle. Inside was a dark purple liquid that seemed to glow faintly. "This is a gift," she said. "A special ingredient for your cooking. It has no smell. It has no taste. But it is very powerful." Gritch's heart began to beat faster. He understood what she was offering. This was poison. This was murder. This was treason. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you trust me with this?" The witch knelt down to look into his eyes. "Because I know what he took from you. I know what he took from all of us. The king is a monster. He has killed thousands. He will kill thousands more, unless someone stops him. Gritch thought about his mother. He thought about his village. He thought about all the goblins who had died in the mines and the fields. He thought about the young cook who almost died from a fork wound. He thought about 15 years of beatings and insults. He took the bottle. The day of the feast arrived. The castle was decorated with flags and flowers. Musicians played happy tunes in every hallway. Servants rushed around carrying plates and glasses. The nobles arrived in beautiful carriages. Their clothes sparkled with gold and jewels. They smiled and laughed and pretended to like each other. In the kitchen, chaos ruled. Borath was more violent than ever. He had broken 2 fingers on a young servant's hand for being too slow. Gritch worked quietly in his corner. He prepared the king's special dish. It was a roasted bird stuffed with rare mushrooms and herbs. The king always demanded this dish. It was his favorite. Gritch had made this dish hundreds of times. He knew every step perfectly. The bird had to be cooked at exactly the right temperature. The mushrooms had to be sliced thin. The herbs had to be fresh. Everything had to be perfect. As he worked, Gritch felt the small bottle in his pocket. It was warm against his leg, almost like it was alive, almost like it was waiting. The feast began at sunset. The great hall was filled with laughter and music. King Vorthen sat at the head of the longest table. He was a large man with a red face and a thick beard. His crown sat crooked on his head. He had already drunk too much wine. The nobles praised him constantly. They told him how wise he was, how strong, how handsome. The king believed every word. He loved praise more than anything, more than gold, more than power. His ego was his greatest weakness. The first courses were served, soups and salads, breads and cheeses. The nobles ate carefully and politely. They used small bites and dabbed their mouths with silk napkins. But the king ate like a wild animal. He grabbed food with his bare hands. He chewed with his mouth open. Grease ran down his beard. He did not care. He was the king. He could do anything. Gritch watched from the kitchen doorway. He had never seen the great hall before. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. So much wealth, so much waste. Meanwhile, goblin children starved in the streets outside the castle walls. The time came for the main course. Borath carried the roasted bird on a golden plate. He walked proudly through the hall. The nobles clapped and cheered. Borath smiled like he had created a masterpiece. He placed the dish before the king and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," Borath said loudly, "I have prepared this dish with my own hands. It is the finest meal ever created in your kingdom." The king waved his hand dismissively. He did not care about the cook. He only cared about the food. He grabbed a large piece of the bird and stuffed it into his mouth. He chewed loudly. He swallowed hard. "More wine," he shouted. The feast continued. The king ate and ate and ate. His plate was never empty. His cup was never dry. He told long, boring stories about his battles and conquests. The nobles pretended to listen. They laughed at his jokes even when they were not funny. An hour passed. Then, too, the king began to feel strange. His stomach hurt. His throat felt tight. He reached for his wine cup, but his hand was shaking. Sweat appeared on his forehead. "I feel," he started to say. Then he began to choke. The nobles gasped. Guards rushed forward. But there was nothing they could do. The king's face turned purple. His eyes bulged. He grabbed at his throat with both hands. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The poison worked slowly. The witch had designed it that way. She wanted the king to suffer. She wanted him to feel fear. She wanted him to understand what it meant to be helpless. King Vorthen fell forward onto the table. Plates and glasses crashed to the floor. The nobles screamed and ran. The guards drew their swords, but there was no enemy to fight. The king's body twitched and shook. Foam came from his mouth. In the kitchen, Gritch watched with calm eyes. He felt no joy. He felt no guilt. He felt only emptiness. Like a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Like he could finally breathe. Boris was arrested immediately. The guards assumed he had poisoned the food. He had bragged about cooking the dish himself. He had stood before everyone and taken credit. Now he would take the blame. The fat chef screamed and cried. He swore he was innocent. He pointed at Gritch. He begged the guards to investigate the goblin. But nobody listened. Nobody cared what a goblin had to say. Barth was dragged away to the dungeons. He would be executed at dawn. The kingdom fell into chaos. The king had no children. His brothers hated each other. They would fight for the throne. There would be civil war. The great army of Drakmor would destroy itself. Gritch quietly left the castle that night. He walked through the empty streets. He crossed the bridge over the Black River. He headed toward the mountains. The witch was waiting for him. "It is done," he said. The witch nodded. "You have started something important. The goblins will hear about this. They will know that one of their own brought down a king. They will find courage." Gritch looked back at the castle. Fires were already burning in some windows. The nobles were fighting among themselves. The guards were confused and scared. The great kingdom of Drakmor was beginning to fall apart. "What happens now?" Gritch asked. The witch smiled. "Now we prepare for the real fight. The king was only one man, but his system of cruelty remains. We must tear it all down. And then we must build something better." Gritch thought about this. He had never imagined building anything. He had only known destruction. But maybe the witch was right. Maybe there could be a future where goblins and humans lived as equals. Maybe there could be a world without kings and slaves. It seemed impossible. But then again, so had killing a king. The goblin chef followed the witch into the dark mountains. Behind them, the castle burned. The screams of nobles echoed through the night. A new chapter in history was beginning. And for the first time in his life, Gritch felt something he had never felt before. Hope.